Welcome to Whitetail Wanderoo Podcast, episode number 164.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Today we're heading to La Crosse, Wisconsin to catch up with a man named Jeff Vance, originally from Osage, Iowa. Jeff is starting his own podcast called Bowhunting Savage. He's been building quite a following on Twitter, and he has almost 2,000 Twitter followers. And he is one of the best retweeters of Whitetail Rendezvous tweets. So, Jeff, thanks for that. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. And this is a special show for me, folks, because I'm going back to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I'm going to talk to the Bowhunting Savage from Iowa, Jeff Vance. And I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, La Crosse, and Jeff came out of Iowa and is hanging out in La Crosse right now. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for letting me be on.
So, Bowhunter Savage, come on, we got to talk about this. What's going on?
Well, last summer I was trying to figure out what I want to do with it, and I just took a few things that I was really interested in. One was bow hunting. I just started it in July. So I've only been bow hunting for a short period of time, and I just fell absolutely in love with the sport. Then I started researching Cameron Haynes, Remi Warren, Steve Rinella, and just listening to these guys. And then I just kind of branched even further. And then Savage is like, it kind of came from the inspiration from Joe Rogan's podcast, because that's what he liked to call people. But then I really sat down and digested what the word meant to me. And it's like, it's somebody that will go above and beyond their passion to make sure they always accomplish what they want to do, even whether they're successful in the field or not. They're out there at 4:00 in the morning, waiting for the sun to rise and waiting for the deer to start waking up out of the bedding.
So one thing, listeners, I've got about 11,000 followers, and I don't think a day goes by before you don't retweet me.
Exactly, because you always produce some really good quality podcasts. And it's like, I've learned a lot. I've listened to hours and hours. I can't even tell you which one my favorite one is. And it's always the information. It's the education part of it. It's one thing I've always been passionate about, is the education. And whether you get into anything, you want to ingest so much information, so this way you kind of get more and more comfortable about what you're going to be getting into.
Thanks for sharing that, and I appreciate it, because going to La Crosse, if anybody doesn't know about University of Wisconsin La Crosse, they have won a lot of championships, and I was fortunate to be around during that time. And we scored some points in football and track that I ran in. But I was going to be a teacher coach, and then unfortunately Vietnam popped its ugly head, and the rest is history, as they say. But teaching and bringing forth knowledge, that's what podcast industry is about, not just Whitetail Rendezvous. There's millions of podcasts, and it's about sharing content with like-minded and building community. And again, Jeff, you do that well for me, and so kudos to you. And while we're on social media and stuff, how do people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about Bowhunting Savage?
My Twitter is Jeff from Iowa. Then just yesterday I started my own in the process of doing it. I bought all my equipment to do my own podcast. So that is at Savage Nation PC. Then you can also find me on Facebook at Savage Nation Podcast, just after facebook.com.
Okay, and so the Twitter account is at Savage Nation
PC.
PC?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Podcast was too long, so I had to short it up.
Okay, and then and Facebook is Jeff from Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you just gave another one.
Oh, that's the podcast. That will be at Facebook or facebook.com Savage Nation Podcast.
And that's going to be on iTunes and Stitcher?
iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, once I get everything up and running. Hopefully should be by May when I should have it up and running.
Excellent. And I'll give a shout out for John L. Dumas, Podcasters Paradise. That's who helped me get started. And you can just, put that in Google and go. And we're hosted off of a podcast website that is also an iteration of Podcasters Paradise. So there's some great folks there. John L. Dumas has been great help, and Mark Aswith. Shout out to you guys to help me. You got me to episode 162, so there you go. So let's get back to Bowhunting Savage. Now, growing up in Iowa, I always get some beautiful, beautiful bucks, and they get some quality animals. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the hunting tradition and where the heck that came from.
For me, it started with my dad, watching him get up at 3:00 in the morning, hearing him going up. He's a muzzleloader himself, and just hearing the stories and the camaraderie about everything. Because it's not necessarily about the hunt or the harvest. To them, it was mostly getting together and talking about their experience. You'd wake up and they'd be coming back off the field at 8:00, 9:00 in the morning from covered in snow, 13 below zero, and they're just out there just talking about everything and seeing how they're going to address their afternoon set and such. But it was just the breakdown of everything, and then going out and being taught by some of his best friends, teaching me how to shoot, and just learning the tricks, just listening for the snap of a twig, or what's the difference between a squirrel. And it was just all breaking down that humbleness of it all, because it's like these guys all been hunting for decades prior to my experience, so they're just dropping me with a bunch of knowledge, and it's just very humbling.
Thanks for sharing that, because the hunting tradition is why this show exists, because the Whitetail Nation, I've been told, and from Quality Deer Management, the folks down there, 17 million people, plus or minus a couple of million. That's huge, and it's created a huge industry. You and I are part of that. You're exploring, and you're going to go out into the podcast world and have a radio show. And make sure you have me as a guest, man. I want to be guest number one.
Of course, Bruce. Of course.
I'd love to be on your show. But having said that, folks, listeners, if you're not a member of Whitetails Unlimited or Quality Deer Management, think about it, because the hunting tradition needs to continue on. What do you think about that, Jeff?
I think it's something that we need to strive for, because with everything going on with the media and such with that, it's like you really have to sit down and look at how we're going to approach the future, because our population centers are getting big. People are getting tired of the factory farming, and hunting is a good way to teach people that. I listened to a good podcast with Joe Rogan where a hardcore vegan transitioned into hunting, and that's what is more of a paleo diet, where he eats and he catches his own fish, and that's what changed his entire life, because he wanted to see what else is out there, and he got into hunting out in Vermont and just fell in love with it. What I like about the hunting, and why we need to keep it still passionate throughout the entire United States, is that it brings unity, brings camaraderie, and it's like it allows everybody to relate and talk about their problems that they've experienced in the field, and like, okay, how can I adjust this? And then on top of that, it opens up to a whole new wide community. Like you said, 17 plus million people out there. Everybody's going to have a story, and everybody's going to be able to give 2 cents about something.
Thanks for sharing that. So, folks, we're going to switch gears now, and we're going to get into hunting now that Jeff has said 2050 wasn't successful. So I'm going to stop right there. What do you mean it wasn't successful?
It was the harvest, but that's only the one aspect of it. What I found that was the most rewarding of it was setting out there. I was learning a lot because this was my first time bow hunting. So what I found that was unsuccessful, like I'd make minor mistakes, like stepping on a twig, making noise, stuff that was just like stuff that I had no idea what I was doing. And so that whole entire season was just about learning about what I'm doing wrong and how can I change it. But the best part was like I was out in the middle of the woods, no cell phone reception, just sitting out there waiting and listening and having fun. And then really working on game that I needed to work on, like calling was a big attribute. And I was successful calling in several bucks, but all of them were illegal. In Minnesota, the series I was hunting in has to have at least a minimum of 4 brow tines. Well, I'd call in 4-pointers, 6-pointers. Like, come on. And I posted on my Twitter feed a bunch of big bucks. I have a 12-pointer, a 10-pointer, 8-pointer, but they just never came around, or I was in the wrong stand at the right time.
Thanks for sharing that. So, listeners, an unsuccessful season typically is people think about is I didn't put Mr. Wonderful down. I didn't get the doe for the freezer or that young buck for the freezer. But just being out there, I've learned after 50 seasons of hunting whitetails that it's the whole experience. In Wisconsin, where we hunt, I'm hunting with the same guy that I tended bar with in 1966. He invited me to his farm. I was a kid out of New York. He invited me to his farm, and the first weekend of gun season, the whole crew, the whole family, 15 people, we killed like 4 bucks in the first day of the season. Then it went on from there because the whitetails was just coming in. But the success was that I built a relationship with Dick Rogers out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin that's lasted 50 years. That's a lot of whitetail hunting.
Yeah, it is. And being able to hunt with your best friends is the greatest reward, because it's like you work your day to day and you're always busy with everything, but there's always that short week, 2 weeks, or if you're a bow hunter, you have months to hunt, but you get to spend time with your best friend where you have no other distractions except for just you and him, or you and your other friends and stuff like that. And just to laugh and to make fun of everybody. And it's like catching that one thing where you watch them trip over a log where they should have been paying attention,
Yeah, it's great. So let's switch to some of the techniques that you've learned, tips, techniques, lessons learned, and share a few of those with our listeners.
I think my favorite technique was really digesting camouflage. Picking out the right pattern for where you're hunting at, because they had like mossy oak, real tree, there's all kinds of different patterns, and that's the biggest thing where you got to pay attention to, like, where are you going to be setting at? Are you going to be sitting in a ground blind, or are you going to be up in a tree stand? So when I was looking at different camouflage between all the different providers, I went with Scent Blocker as a name drop there. But the camo pattern they had were all my trees that I had where I set at just matched perfectly for it, and I never had a deer spook because I was never spoke to deer based off of not wearing the right camouflage. If something didn't go right or something they snicker off, was because of an outside influence, whether it be like a squirrel or a fox sound or even a raccoon, or we have coyotes. So that's a big thing we had to worry, where we had problems with too later on in the season during the shotgun season and muzzleloader season.
Thanks for that. And let's stay right, on scent control. And, it's a huge industry in and of itself. And tell the listeners what you do other than the clothing for scent control.
I use the Scent Off brand that you can pick up at most Walmarts. And that has seemed to be a very good transition for it, because I don't really had any interaction with wildlife where they smelt me or anything like that. So even walking through the trails consistently, I would spray my boots down with it, bathe myself in their products, and never had an issue with scent causing a situation where they just run off or won't even come by.
Let's stay right on there. How do you play the wind?
Well, where I hunt at, it rolls right down in a valley, and so I usually my tree stand is about 20 feet up in the air, and luckily for me, it's like I stand on the opposite side where I call the does or the bucks from. So when the wind comes through, it pushes them off in a different direction. So that's where we ran into a lot of trouble with it, because it's like the wind would go one direction, then half hour later switch to a different direction. So it's like, okay, how can we really mask our smell? So what we ended up doing is using doe and estrus or buck urine, which was able to mask a scent all the way around us. So this way we would get does to come in, but nothing worth harvesting. Like they'd be like 1, 2, 3 years old. So it's like they still have plenty of time to sire something that could be a trophy later on down the road. So we passed up on a lot of does because of the buck and heat, and the doe and estrus and all that stuff, because it allowed us to cover our smell and our tracks.
So Bowhunting Savage, let's stick with that. And I'm going to kind of throw a curve here, but I was thinking about the name. Where's that name came from?
Bowhunting Savage? Where it came from is when I reiterated in the beginning of the podcast is that I just started hunting at the time. And then I had Twitter for a period of time where I didn't know what to do with it. I just kind of let it lay dormant. And then I just started picking different interests of my own. And that's where I came up with Bowhunting Savage. It's got into bow hunting, fell in love with it. Then Savage came from the whole digestion of the going the extra mile, pushing through the cold, pushing through sore, achy bones, muscles. And you got to go the extra step, going for that giving it your all.
Thanks for that. Let's talk about cooking creates memories. What the heck does that mean?
I love to cook. I've cooked all kinds of different game, prepared it up, but I always prepare around friends. And usually always a group of 5, 6, 7, 8 people. And when you control that, it's you push on your pass on your love of it. And then that creates a good memory. And it's I found that it's listening to a lot of my dad's friends and listening to those guys, a lot of their best memories are surrounded by food. And it's usually always, you get a bit of an ego because you always have that one solid recipe that never fails. A few years ago, I cooked up deer shish kebabs during the 4th of July, and I had a crowd of people, and I had over 100 plus skewers. Everybody ate like kings, but everybody was laughing and smiling. And it's and when you're sitting down and here this past summer, people were bringing up that exact event. It's remember when you cooked this, or remember when this person said that, and it just brings up those memories because when everything's all when you're in those later years, those memories of what makes you smile, like you lived your life, because you only have one life to live, and it's you might as well maximize it as much as possible. And I've always found that food always really brings forth those memories.
Thanks for that, Jeff. And let's stick on your questions that I asked, for when you were prepping for the show. You have two things. You have teaching and you have education. So let's just lump it into one and talk about people that taught you and where you got your hunting education from. And then you've already announced your show coming up. How are you going to intertwine that into your own podcast?
Basics. Going down to the basics. Good friend of mine, his name's Leo, and he's the one that really spent a lot of time with me hunting and fishing hunting a lot of times, because my dad will either have to be working or it just wasn't that big of an interest for him, or he had something else going on. But we spent a lot of times out in the vehicle, out in the field, walking, and he showed me that patience is the biggest thing. You get that mastered down, regardless of whoever you're working with, you'll be able to teach them something. And patience was the biggest thing he taught me how, and that's hopefully what I can do for other people. And breaking things down simplistically, going to the simplest possible way to breaking down a situation, where it's what happened? Why'd you spook up that pheasant prematurely, or what happened with the dog? And breaking everything down in a way that anybody can understand. One way that I found that I get better at something in particular is to teach it. For example, shooting a bow. My current girlfriend right now, she's going to get a elite prime. She just fell in love with the bow, and the way I broke it down to her was that it's every little aspect of it. One big selling factor of the bow is that it's let off is amazing. And then when she shot it, then that's what I want her to focus on, because being there with whether it be a rifle or a bow there'd be times where you have to wait for that animal, whether you be shooting a turkey, elk, a moose. It's going to have to turn in the right way, so you make sure you do that clean, ethical shot. This way, it's one shot down, and then you're able to go and clean up the animal.
So, what's this about good to eat game only by 2018? That's Jeff's goal, ladies and gentlemen. So, how does that work?
My idea, I want to be able to eat my entire diet based off of going out catching my own fish, going out hunting. Like in May, I'm going turkey hunting, and I'm hoping to be successful with the harvest, because it's like over deer season, I was not only paying attention for the deer, but looking at all the turkeys that I have surrounded in my little area in southern Minnesota. But where that goal comes into play is that it's like I want to eat cleanly, eat an all natural lifestyle, like a paleo diet, which means like trying to eat the greens that are found in your area, growing a garden, eating your fish that are found in your local in the Mississippi or any of the local rivers in the area, and then on top of that, hunting a game. Like hopefully I'll be able to have an opportunity to go out west and go hunting for a muley deer or an elk, and eventually getting an opportunity to go hunt a nice black bear, like a nice fall bear. You just be able to stockpile my refrigerator, my freezer, with just all natural meat. Nothing that's come from factory farming, where it's pumped, where you have to worry about hormones and like, just having that all natural flavor to it. It's like that gaminess to it. It's like that's what attracts me to that type of goal. Is just knowing where my food comes from.
Thanks for sharing that. Education, that's what Whitetail Rendezvous is about. We bring content, different formats, different questions, different people, but every single show I strive for is bringing some nuggets. I call them big bucket nuggets to the table, so you take it away and it has value. And so, in our lives as hunters, hunter-gatherers, folks, that's where we started. We were hunters and gatherers way back when. And it's something that you embrace. How do you feel about that, Jeff?
That's one of the best lifestyles out there, because it gets to expose you to the outdoor environment, and you get to know what's going on. You get to be boots on the ground, looking at your environment, how to maintain and keep the land green and lush, avoid the poisons, and making sure everything in your area is not being contaminated by sewage or chemical waste. And that hunt and gathering lifestyle is just fun, because you get to go out there and look for it. Like morel mushroom hunting is going to be hot here in a few weeks, and you're already familiar with the area, so it's like that like there's good place to go get this natural mushroom that's out there. It's just absolutely delicious with deer or chicken or anything you can come up with. And it's back to our foundation, because you never know what could ever happen. In today's society, with being can be very violent. You never know what could cause a situation where we lose refrigeration. We could lose a power, electricity from anything that can cause a situation. And having an education in that, going out and looking for nuts and berries, and going out hunting your game and catching fish, you kind of have the one up on the people that are not necessarily educated in it yet. And you have the opportunity now, like I do, to be able to teach that. Going to teaching them the proper the resource sites online, the DNR websites, to be able to look at what's in season, what's not in season, and books. There's so much opportunity out there for education. You can never stop learning.
Thanks for Jeff, and unbelievable. I just looked at the clicker, and we're over almost 32 minutes into it. So just take 90 seconds, a minute, and give shout outs for people who help you along the way, and then we'll close the show.
All right. My first shout out, I want to go shout out to Genuine Crafters, and just recently got a knife from them. It's a Damascus steel blade. he wanted me to check it out, test it, do a demo of it, and I'm really excited to test it out this season. Toby from Dead Red Outdoors, he's been a big influence, helping me. He got me my very first diamond peep, and I just fell in love with it. You guys go check it out at Dead Red Outdoors on Twitter. And then if you're looking for a very good educational podcast to really focus your mind about leadership and how to work around others, Jocko Willink podcast, the Jocko podcast you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, any of those major websites.
Hey, thanks for that. On behalf of Whitetail Rendezvous Nation, and we come from all over North America, Jeff. You've been great to have on a guest, and again, the support you give me in social media, specifically on Twitter, is greatly appreciated.
Very welcome, Bruce.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient. If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.